In this episode, we depart Louisiana for Alabama, which is where our next two RV parks are located. This will conclude the first volume of the Yonder Years book, which is what this series is based upon. Hi, I'm Dave Atkinson, and welcome to Life on the Strait. Thank you for watching, and if you'd like to follow our 2-year journey as it unfolds, please consider subscribing, which is free. As we departed Cajun Palms on the morning of March 17th, we were sorry to leave Louisiana behind. We didn't make it to New Orleans during our adventure as we decided to bypass the Big Easy by taking Interstate 12 north of Lake Pontchartrain out of Baton Rouge until it merged up again with Interstate 10. We crossed over the mighty Mississippi River, which runs through the western side of Baton Rouge and continues its winding southeasterly direction through New Orleans and out into the Gulf of Mexico. This would be a medium-long day of driving, as we would be covering nearly 300 miles. Almost immediately as we departed east out of Cajun Palms, Interstate 10 headed out across the this is hard to say, Atchafalaya National Wildlife Refuge, basically a gator and snake-infested swamp as far as one could see. The freeway was well above the swamp, thanks to the incredible Atchafalaya Basin Bridge, also known as the Louisiana Airborne Memorial Bridge. This 18.2-mile-long structure, and it opened in 1973, is actually two bridges side by side, except in two areas where they cross a channel and a river. All we could think of was what it must have been like building such a structure in such an inhospitable part of the country. Driving high up in G2, it was easy to look over the sides of the bridge and down into the swamp, and every now and then we'd see a tiny little cabin or lean-to structure below. I thought of the line from Raiders of the Lost Ark when Indiana Jones is down with the snakes in the Well of Souls and evil Belloc tosses the rope into the pit. After Indiana tells him to come on down, Belloc says that we are very comfortable to be up here. That's how we felt driving high up over the swamp. As Interstate 10 left Louisiana into Mississippi, the first off-ramp was to the John Stennis Space Center, where NASA tests rocket engines. It would have been fun to go through the visitor center, but it didn't figure into our schedule. Interstate 10 continued into Alabama and through the surprisingly large and modern city, at least the downtown portion, of Mobile. As we passed through the downtown part of town, I-10 headed into the 3,000-foot-long George Wallace Tunnel, and that's actually two tunnels, there's one in each direction, to take us below the Mobile River, emerging into Blakely Island, where the USS Alabama Battleship Memorial Park sat off in the distance. At the time, we thought that we were looking out into the Gulf of Mexico, but it was actually the massive Mobile Bay, which does lead out into the Gulf. We took the Baldwin Beach Express southbound from I-10, which turned into the Foley Beach Express, and that almost dropped us at the doorstep of Sugar Sands RV Resort. The two express highways between I-10 and the resort really caught us off guard, as all the evergreen trees and lush farmlands on both sides reminded us of home. It was completely different from the Louisiana swampland that we had just come from. Amy's Uncle Louis lived for many years in Victorville, California, and he liked to grab a beer at a local tavern where he made friends with one of the waitresses, Tammy. After Uncle Louis moved north, first to live with his sister and later to live with us, Tammy also made a move, heading down to Gulf Shores, Alabama. Uncle Louis paid for Tammy's airfare when he was living with us, and we picked her up at SeaTac Airport and showed her the sights around Seattle and Puget Sound, so we got to be friends with her as well. Tammy lived about 5 miles from the RV park we were staying at, and she would act as our tour guide during our short 2-night stay. The next afternoon, we met up with Tammy at a waterfront restaurant called Tacky Jack's. We tried something new, fried and Cajun alligator, plus some hush puppies. The alligator was a bit tough, but it wasn't all that bad, especially the Cajun variety. Hush puppies are deep-fried balls of cornmeal-based batter, and they were tasty as well. From there, we went over to Perdido Key and to Flora-Bama, a huge lounge, bar, and gift shop that straddles the border between Alabama and Florida. Amy stood in front of a sign with her arms extended, half of her in one state and the other half in the other. This was the first time that either of us had set foot in Florida, albeit temporarily. The dance floor was a hoot with ropes crisscrossing high above with a huge variety of bras dangling down. When you think of college spring breaks, that is exactly what this bar was meant for. We walked out in front of Flora-Bama to the beach, and it reminded us of when we were in French Polynesia. It was all pure white and soft sand, sugar sand as they would call it. And this was truly the Gulf of Mexico versus what we thought after leaving Mobile. We both walked out into the warm, clear water. On either side of Flora-Bama were huge condos and apartment buildings stretching for miles in both directions. We could even see Pensacola Beach far off to the east. And people, they were everywhere. It may not have been spring break, but the beaches were packed. After Flora-Bama, Tammy drove us about 9 miles west to the Gulf State Park Pier. Across the street from the pier were several widely spaced tall towers. That was a zip line attraction. Here we got to taste another southern food, boiled peanuts in the shell, and neither of us cared for this at all. Just a soggy mess. The pier is 20 feet wide by 1,540 feet long, and we saw several people fishing off it. In fact, one guy hooked a stingray and was trying to get the lure out of its mouth so it could release it back into the water, but we suspect that the ray didn't make it. I photographed a beautiful pelican out near the end of the pier, along with a large school of stingrays. By late afternoon, we went to Papa Rocco's Pizza and Oyster Bar. The shrimp boats just dropped off a load of Royal Reds, and the restaurant had the pots already boiling as the shrimp arrived. And we got a big plate of them along with jalapeno and cheese-topped oysters. I tried the gigantic shrimp and they were great, but I passed on the oysters. Amy ate them. We next went to Souvenir City to grab some t-shirts. They had a sign next to the door with an arrow pointing to the high water mark from Hurricane Ivan. It was between 4 and 5 feet off the floor. In fact, driving throughout town showed us a common theme, and that would be other than the adorable dolphin and manatee concrete mailbox holders. And that was that many, if not most homes, began at the second story, with the first story acting as a covered garage with no walls to the front or to the back of the parked vehicles. Tammy took us to a few more bars, ending up at one where they served some food. There we had fried green tomatoes and a slice of mud pie. Thumbs up on both choices. Then we followed her back to where she lived so that we could see her house and her pet rabbit. Her husband was working out of town, but we did get to meet one of her kids earlier in the day. We said our goodbyes and headed back to the RV park for our final night's stay. We did a lot, drank a lot, and ate a lot that day, and we had Tammy to thank for showing us around town. We ran into a little snag getting back onto Interstate 10 the next morning, overshooting a road that would take us to the on-ramp, but after a little scenic detour, we got back on good old I-10 and settled in for a 230-mile drive to our next destination, which was the Army base called Fort Rucker, next to Dothan, Alabama. Amy's nephew Ryan and his family were stationed there as he was a helicopter pilot. For most of the day, we would be driving through Florida, but we'd head north into Alabama for the final leg. As we entered the town of Dothan, and it has a population around 70,000, we filled up G2 and then headed towards the Army base. Fort Rucker has its own RV park called Engineer Beach. Ryan had reserved a spot for us, and after getting screened at the gate and getting permission to bring our firearms in with us, we drove in, found the RV park, and unhooked the car. It was a nice enough park for a military base located next to a lake, and we found a spot and got all hooked up. We drove to Ryan's and Holly's home on the base, and Holly was busy with her little boy Walter. Ryan came home later, but we didn't do anything that night. The next morning, the entourage met us at the RV park, and little Walter tried out the driver's seat of G2. He looked like he was ready to hit the open road. Ryan took us to the incredible U.S. Army Aviation Museum that was within the base, meaning that most people would never be able to see it without a soldier acting as their escort. Such a waste, because the museum's exhibits were vast and very well presented. We spent over 3 hours looking at mostly helicopters, but also drones, antique, and spotter aircraft. We ended the day with lunch at a local barbecue spot that the soldiers liked to frequent. As we departed Engineer Beach the next morning, our next stop would be nearly 270 miles away at Travelers Campground in Alachua, Florida. Between March 21st and June 11th, our travels would be entirely within the state of Florida. Next time, we crack open the second volume of the Yonder Years as we move into Florida, our home over the next 3 months as we stay in 7 different RV resorts.